of the past. Back to the tone seems fine, and those struggles were in vain. There is no one that could tell if I will be happy ever again.
Long story short, today's subject of conversation is a band from Bucharest called Linear Disorder, and their release from 2019 called Oceans, a release that was issued on the market by Psychosounds Music, a small label from Bucharest ran by Mr. Dorel Tudor. In the underground, I know that in the underground you do not find box office smashes or things like this, but still there are bands that offer unique nuances and some timid audacity, which is nice in its own way. I would start by saying that this kind of a release is not exactly what it seems to be. Now, if we start with and because it's not what it seems to be, this was actually a very pleasant surprise for me, because I expected something else, but in the end it proved to be something of a different kind. But if we look at the cover, this looks like I don't know, like a power metal cover, like a symphonic metal cover, pretty much like a Stratovarius cover, to tell you the truth. And if we look at the four musicians in here, nice looking persons, all of them, but still you would not expect them to be able to deliver real metal or real death metal or some sort of aggressive music. So we have the founding member Mihail Georgescu with an interesting steampunk hat and Halloween looking like. We have this guy called Mihai Maciucă on the vocals, which pretty much looks like the kind of guy that you would like to share your office space with, or should you still be a student, you would like to share those student dormitories with him and go to a party and have beers, but still you would not expect him to deliver death metal growls and very deep death metal growls. And again, a very young person doing the drums, Matei Radu. Again, the kind of guy that would probably play Limp Bizkit or some other band, modern band, but not doing the drums in death metal. And of course, a nice looking young lady doing the bass. Again, not the kind of people that you would expect to perform old school metal, but actually they do. And this is what I'm saying, that this was a very pleasant surprise for me to begin with. Again, the cover I think is not as inspired as it should have been. because you have here a central element, an hourglass. Maybe the cover would have looked better without this hourglass, but again, the persons who did the cover or choose to promote the band in this way, I think they should have done a better job, because this is not the horizon of expectations. This does not set the correct horizon of expectation, because the music is totally different from the pictures and totally different from the cover in itself. And I would say it's not a very original cover and should have been done in a different way. But still, as I said, a very pleasant surprise in the sense that the music is actually much better than expected. And as usually, I will start with what I consider to be the main point of attraction in here. And I would say that the main point of attraction are the ghosts and the relation with the ghosts, with the past, the ghosts of the past. And also not just the relation with the ghosts, but some sort of remote in nature graveyard poetry done in the style of December Noir. So I think that December Noir from Germany is perhaps the best international reference for this kind of release from young musicians. December Noir on the release called A Discouraged Believer, they exaggerated as well with the cover. So if you look at the cover, it will send your mind into a direction of God knows what kind of brutal death metal or blackened doom or something like that, but no, it actually, the music is in here as well different from the cover. But the story with putting let's say uninspired covers for CDs is quite long enough. Perhaps the most famous example is that of Visceral Evisceration, and again, that was a lot of gore on that cover, but the music had nothing to do with what's happening on the cover, and I would say the music has nothing to do with what's happening on the cover in here as well. So as I said, the main point of attraction is the interaction with ghosts and some sort of remote in nature graveyard poetry done in the style of December Noir. I mean that the action takes place on lonely and forsaken forest pathways, but unlike in Draconian or unlike in Opeth, there is no fake gothicism in here. There is no useless orchestration. There are no cliched melodies or mediocre female vocals as you would expect. No orchestrated leitmotifs for the sake of obtaining some sort of grandiloquence, and none to very little keyboards. And this is a very big plus of the album. As I said, the cover may suggest some power, some symphonic metal, a lot of keyboards, but there are actually none to very little keyboards, and I'm glad about it, because keyboards tend to be very annoying and tiresome, and musicians overplay the keyboards and they kind of try to cover their lack of ideas by the use of keyboards. So thank you God, no keyboards on this one. Interesting enough, the sense of graveyard poetry, and this is a very important aspect, comes from the way in which the songs are performed. This is not a truly depressed or mournful graveyard poetry, but we are dealing with a well-grounded, sharp and incisive rhythmic section, an inexorable and assailant rhythmic section, and the real feeling of graveyard poetry is that of Dies Irae. Dies Irae, the beginning of the day of wrath. And all across this music there is a young, vengeful ardor of the betrayed one playing in here. Now, when you are dealing with ghosts, basically you are kind of, when you are dealing with ghosts in metal, you are kind of resurrecting an old principle from photography. Because in the times when the photographers used real cameras and not smartphones, when you had problems understanding a picture, the best way to understand it was to use the negative, and some things appear on the negative part of the picture that are not visible in the normal picture. So this is how the photographers did it back in the days. But now if you are only using your smartphone, you no longer have access to that negative. But it still happens, and this kind of principle to use the negative of a photography and to see what you cannot see in the normal picture is applied on this release as well. So they are working with negatives to make the real picture gain more details. Now, interesting enough, if we are talking about ghosts, we will quote poetry from a local poet called Alexandru Petria, who said that love means giving water to ghosts. That is, watering the ghosts like you do with plants, so that they can turn green or they can grow again their green leaves. With the only difference in here that we are talking about carnivorous plants and ghosts of violent devotion. And the idea is that no matter how devastating and how harmful those moments and those past entities might have been, you still love them with the same devotional savagery. And this is what gives such musicians in here their mature bite, because the instrumentation and the rhythmic section and also the way in which the vocals are performed do have that mature bite from the 90s. And we are talking about the kind of musicians who recharge themselves with the pessimism of harsh and acrimonious contemplations. Acrimonious coming from acrimony meaning in Romanian acreală, something very bitter and angry. So people who, as I said, recharge themselves with the pessimism of harsh and acrimonious contemplations, and from here they kind of turn introversion into extroversion and vice versa, until introversion and extroversion become part of the same thing, or the same thing with a double function. And that is precisely why the sorrowful tunes are capable to add flesh and real ligaments to the bones of the rhythmic section. And unlike what happens in doom metal, where the voices and the guitars propagate into some sort of void or are wasted in a vacuum, here the voice and the guitars do not propagate into some sort of void, do not get lost in the vacuum. The rhythmic section is firmly present in all its conquering vigor and fragility, and even the musical minor keys are strong and honestly evil. So, as I said, even the musical minor keys, I tend to say that they remain strong and evil. The ghosts, as I said, are pretty much expressed in, so if you want, on all the songs, but perhaps the third one, called Trapped in the Past, speaks openly about the subject. They say that in the lyrics that the past is a monster that dwells deep inside, and looking into the past, it's like having another mind or another eyes. So basically it's music that speaks about those kind of confrontations that one cannot escape. Now, reading the lyrics, if you read them as poetry, maybe it's not such a good idea, but when they are being sang by the two vocalists, that is by Mihail Georgescu on the melodic voice and by Mihai Măciucă on the death metal voice on growling, they become something else. The way in which the lyrics are sang creates all the difference in the world. So don't read these lyrics as poetry. Wait until the musicians will deliver their performance and basically bring a new semantic value into those lyrics by the way in which they interpret the lyrics. As an interesting final idea about Ghost is that this is the kind of release that engages or addresses a certain existential area, theorized by Jacques Derrida in 1993 on a lecture called Spectres of Mars, where Derrida uses the term hauntology. Hauntology means from a combination from haunting and ontology, and hauntology refers to the study of a disturbing and eerie zone where time collapses, where past memories and past associations bring a lot of distress and inescapable shadows inside a person's mind, where past traumas past traumatic events regain a sinister life of their own, one that can truly cancel a person's future. And that's why when Marx Fisher reapproached this lecture by Derrida on hauntology, he basically associated the term hauntology with the notion of cancelled futures. And the most acutely felt symptom, or the greatest power of darkness in this area, is that of unfulfilled dreams and betrayed expectations. Now, talking about cancelled futures, unfulfilled dreams and betrayed expectations, perhaps this is the meeting point of Linear Disorder with December Noir, because pretty much like in December Noir, of course on a much lower scale, because they don't have this grandiose dark feeling that December Noir is able to convey, but still, if you like December Noir, A Discouraged Believer, you will probably like this one as well, because it's pretty much done with the same vibe. But as in December Noir, the sorrowful melodies are actually filled with vengeful remorses for dishonesty. And if you look into the eyes of the girl, perhaps her look tells the story of the entire release. The way she looks at the photographer tells the story of the entire release much better than the cover does. And also the dark emotions, just like in the case of December Noir, are luminous in their sincerity. So we are talking about music made by people able to embrace their inner horrors and to watch with some sense of fulfillment how darkness descends, about people able to channel firm emotions and to make a solid enough impact. Not really about a weeping or really vulnerable music done by weeping and vulnerable musicians. Now, going to the vocal parts. Vocal parts are the artwork of these two gentlemen. The guy in here with the steampunk hat is doing the melodic voices, and Mihai is doing the death metal growls. I would say about the vocal parts that they provide the growls. The death metal growls provide the dark blood, and the melodic voice provides the lymph. I would say it like this. The lymph, those white cells that perfectly drain themselves into the dense and dark bloodstream of the abyssal death metal voice. Both voices, I would say, they are real forces of strengthening of the human psyche, and listening to them you feel that something is being reinforced inside yourself. The past, for example, regains its vigor, becoming once again a friendly force of the deep. And this is one of the best ways to fight an identity crisis, especially since modern people refuse most of the time to make friends with their demons, and modern people apparently they suffer from some sort of a demonological myopia. But here voices are mercilessly captivating, no disguise is used. These are the kind of vocalists capable to build their reputation on demons. And as I said, we have a fine duo in here, creating a pleasant balance between sadness and anger, which is proof enough that these two musicians have experienced both of these feelings, sadness, anger, and maybe even some sort of happiness, but derived in a very abyssal or underground kind of way. Now, the guitars, there are death metal riffs and solos which are as disquieting as they are talented, and they can produce at the level of the guitars the shape of liberation to come. Really confident and forceful chords, always ready to convey some sort of glamour and to put much emotion into the storyline at the level of the guitars. And apart from December Noir, maybe some other influences on the guitars could be Soilwork, Arch Enemy, In Flames, but the idea is that the heaviness of the guitars is really there. About the bass line performed by Anna Nekula, the bass is the one that links the death metal parts to some early Anathema or Paradise Lost influences, and basically at the level of the bass the music is given some sort of a darker death doom sound, reminiscent, as I said, of Anathema. At the level of the bass line we can see also a very important aspect, namely that, and here is another mistake in the promotion of this band, namely that melodic death metal is not at all the same thing as death metal played with melody. In my opinion, melodic death metal means in almost all the cases the musician applies a basic pop formula and then metalizes it a little bit. But death metal played with melody, in the death metal played with melodious parts, the death metal remains intact. The death metal parts remain unaffected, they remain straightforward with undisguised and fearless power of advancement. So the death metal remains clear when we are talking about death metal played with melody. The death metal remains clear and the flame remains solid. And into the death metal played with melody, which is not the same thing as melodic death metal, the melodies combine themselves very well in terms of feeling, or that the brutal parts and the melodic parts, they go along together very naturally along the same vector of a feeling. And what else should be said in this? Because they also say they play modern music. Modern, I would say it's a modern music in the sense in which some transitions are made or in which some progressions are being mastered, but this is as far as modernity goes in here. They never do it like modern bands. They never go to the end of the image in order to embroider on, to zoom in on the frame of that image. They stay in the image. So that metal is real in here, and it resists any kind of verification, and it's the kind of release where things come naturally. About the drum section performed by Matei Radu, this is a very good performance as well, despite his very young age, because the drum is not overdoing the parts. And so I would say that the drummer also brings kind of a better balance between the softer and the darker sides, and the drums kind of turn the crescendos into diminuendos and the diminuendos into a crescendo, while still keeping the blasts into the bedrock of the genre, which is in this case death metal. Now I will pretty much end this presentation by quoting from CD issued by Draconian called The Burning Hello, where inside the booklet of the CD Draconian quotes Lord Tennyson, and the quotation goes as follows: "That which we are, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield." Perhaps this is the best description of this music with a phrase taken from Lord Tennyson, and also perhaps another Draconian line best describes this music. On the song, I think, Through Infectious Waters, Draconian have a line of the kind: "All hope is lost, but perhaps this is the cradle of salvation." Thank you so much, and take care.